I was working with children that had been impacted by trauma, um, on a lot of different a lot of different areas, predominantly through poverty. And even I worked at the height of in Flint, Michigan during their water crisis, and I saw a lot of things happen with children in their development or their lack of development, I should say. And I was like, I went and I did a parent-child event, and there was over 600 parents and children. And it was during that time that, and for a while, I had been thinking about how can I segue or how can I bring everything that I've done for the past 40 years together. And we can all have our moments when I'm just going to say, um, our nervous systems can become dysregulated, or we are in that fight, flight, or freeze.
I'm thinking about, so you have 40 years of looking at children, right? Like their social, emotional, cognitive, physical development. And then you have, a couple decades of teaching Pilates. You're a college instructor for Pilates, and these are students who um they went through COVID at an important piece of development. And so you're seeing the impacts of individual trauma, family trauma, community trauma from, the water crisis that happened in Flint, and also global trauma. And so you are really supporting people who've experienced so many levels of trauma. And so I'm curious, how do you, when you are approaching somebody and thinking about Pilates or movement, because I know you're a movement expert, not just Pilates, how do you think about movement in relation?
Like, let's just say from scooting to crawling to walking to running to jumping, all of those big muscle movements. And then also the fine motor movements. They're doing things that are integrating from when a baby is born and they develop from like when they're drawn up, and then when they begin to develop, they start moving outward. And usually the fine motor skills in their fingers are the last things to develop. I mean, we all have, I mean, every single one of us, it affects us so differently. And that tends to be a pretty common theme with the children that I've worked with, is not a lot of body awareness. So that's spatial awareness. That is, understanding where their body is, space and time, and how they move their body as they're moving. And so setting up like almost like an obstacle course using a variety of things. I like the kids to go barefoot if possible, because our feet have over 7,000 proprioceptors in them. So the nerve endings in our feet are really important. But I use materials that are, that I've used for adults as for children, because I have clients, like, let's just say, that are over 50, and they're balancing. And I mean, there's been studies that have been done around using motor movement or body-based movements to see children and their level of skills or their level of confidence grows when they can accomplish something. And so through the motor movements, in finding consistency, so they're continually using it. But I go back to some of that very early childhood infant development, because if they missed a phase in infant development,
they just like to be up and they like to be scooching along the couch and then walking, but they miss that whole tummy time crawling piece just because it's very aversive to them.
when they miss it, usually there's a delay in some other kind, like they might have issues with their balance. So, and I want to just preface this by saying that just because they have a sensory issue doesn't mean that they can't identify what their emotions are. So it's like if you think about the beginning of like a jumping jack,
Yep.
because to do a jumping jack, usually by the age of 8 or 9, they can accomplish doing those kind of things. And I've been trained in children's yoga, and Pilates to me is just, I've done a lot with it. And I think that it's just adapting it to what the child needs. It's my lifelong mission to educate and bring awareness to the fitness industry around trauma-informed movement.